Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, distinguished Division Governor Jerry Allman and her husband Michael, distinguished Area Governor Ed Nicholas and his wife tonight, Joy, and our very special guests, Patrick Manteiga and his mother, Peggy Smigel. Wow, what a week this is for Patrick Manteiga and his family. Tonight, first of all, no rain yet. That's a good thing, a good way to start. Tonight you will be honored by our presentation of the 2012 Communicator of the Year Award. And on Friday, he publishes the 90th anniversary issue of La Gazzetta. Whoa, wow. That is nearly 5,000 weekly editions of the nation's only trilingual newspaper. Now I want to make one thing clear to you. Patrick Manteiga is not 110 years old. When you go into his office on 7th Avenue, and I urge you to go there and meet him, you will find him, the publisher, sitting behind a huge desk. He sits there, and he sits directly in front of an absolutely mesmerizing portrait of his grandfather, Victoriano Manteiga, the founder of La Gazzetta magazine, newspaper rather. Patrick followed his father, Roland Manteiga, 14 years ago to become the third generation editor and publisher of La Gazzetta newspaper. So there he sits. He sits with advertisers, with hosts of local politicians, with old-time photographs, with new photographs, with contributing columnists, with the Italian editor, folks working in the print shop, people distributing the newspaper all over Tampa, suppliers, and deadlines. And if you're in the newspaper business, you know that deadlines never, ever end. It is a constant in his life. At the end of the week, he gets to sit back. He gets to sit back, he takes a deep breath, then he looks up at the portrait of his grandfather sitting right behind him, and he asks the question, did I do enough? Did I do enough? Did I do enough to make La Gazzetta profitable? Did I do enough to keep this business going the way it should be going? And it's not just the newspaper, Patrick. He also says, did I do enough to promote this community that I absolutely adore and love? And he says, did I do enough for all the Latins as a member of the Hispanic delegation for Hillsborough County? Then he says, did I do enough for the kids in this community while serving as advisory council member for the Hillsborough County School Board? Then he says, did I do enough to ensure the future of the Cuban Club, where I serve as treasurer on the Cuban Club Foundation? Then he says, did I do enough for the business leaders of the Ybor City Round Table to bring new tourists and new businesses to Ybor City? Then he says, did I do enough to meet my commitment to the class of 2012 Leadership Tampa? Then he asks the question, do I do enough to promote this region as a member of the host committee for the Republican National Convention? And somewhere along the line, he remembers to ask himself, did I do enough for my family? You see, since 1979, Tampa Toastmasters have presented the Communicator of the Year Award. 18 times we've presented it. We've presented it to radio and television personalities. We've presented it to business people, to community leaders, to a military commander. We presented it to newspaper columnists, a professional athlete. Most recently, we presented it to a highly successful high school football coach. And if there's any common thread that binds all of these highly successful, highly motivated, extraordinary people, it is this. Just like Patrick Manteiga, they constantly ask themselves, did I do enough? And they simply won't stop until they know they have. Tonight, I can't think of anyone in this community as a business leader, as a communicator, more deserving of the Tampa Toastmasters 2012 Communicator of the Year Award than Patrick Manteiga. So at this time, I would like to ask Patrick to come and join me with President Larry Carlin at the podium. And I ask, ladies and gentlemen, that you welcome the 2012 Communicator of the Year, Mr. Patrick Manteiga. I think that you've got some hardware to present.
Patrick, on behalf of 1810, Toastmasters 1810, please accept this plaque for Communicator Year 2012.
Now it's your turn.
Thank you very much. You know, it's a great group you have here. It's a great group of speakers. I told one of my employees that I was going tonight to accept the Communicator of the Year award. So I was walking out the door. He said, "Really?" He said it in such a way that, you know, I knew what he meant. That didn't boost my confidence to live up to the Patrick Manteiga that was promoted by my Toastmaster advocate, John Morse. Public speaking is my worst method of communication. If rated from a 1 to 10, 1 being sunbathing on the beach and 10 being burning at the stake, public speaking is a 10 to me. TV, speaking on TV, rates a 7. Radio, which I like, is a 3. Talking on the phone, which I adore, is a 2. And of course, writing is 1. With writing, it's so nice to take all day to form a thought, and to express it. You get to do it without seeing the reaction of the audience that you have. I have the luxury of editing, revisiting, rewriting, fact-checking, all on my time frame. It's a true joy that public speaking just doesn't seem to give me. I'm a little shy at accepting your mantle as Communicator of the Year. What puts me more at ease is some of the criteria that's used. Some of the lines and the criteria has that the message persists over time and has the message impacted the community. These criteria give me comfort because they remind me of my grandfather and my father, who steered, like I said, a newspaper for many years. My tool for communication is La Gazetta, and their spirit, their accomplishments, their ideas continue to guide me in La Gazetta. I feel more comfortable accepting the award on behalf of the newspaper and 3 generations of publishers and editors than I do by myself. Because it is our 90th anniversary edition this week, and because my family has been working solid for the last 3 weeks, We haven't had a day off, my wife and I, for probably about 14 days now, and we're not going to have one until we're done with it. That was as far as I was able to write a speech. So from this point, all I can do is talk to you about what's in my heart, which is my newspaper. Like I said, it is a family-owned newspaper, and it's an extended family. It's not just my wife, myself, my mother, my kids, my employees who are like family. It's the history of my father and my grandfather. And it's a proud heritage. The two publishers before me each were very much characters. My grandfather, Victoriano, which is the gnarled hand you see behind my head there in that picture, painting by Freddie Pacheco, my grandfather late in his years. By this time, my grandfather started off as a 6'2", tall, thin man. He worked every day, like I said, he worked every day at his desk. When he passed away, he was about 6 inches short. He had become stooped. His head was like this, but every day he would work at Lagosette. We're featuring a story in this week's newspaper about my newspaper's history, and there's a few lines about my grandfather that I'd like to read. Victoriano Manteiga, the legendary founder of Lagosette, was born in Cuba in 1894. In 1914, he sailed aboard the SS Olivet from Cuba to a Tampa that was vibrant and growing. Ybor City had long-established ties to Cuba. It was a logical place for young Latino in search of fortune to come. And search he did. For when he landed, he had a $10 bill and 2 white linen suits in his name. He rented a room on the on the top floor of El Encanto Cleaners, and on his second day in the city, he went to work in the Morgan Cigar Factory in West Tampa as a reader. Readers held a special place in the cigar industry. A practice that originated in Cuba before the advent of radio. Readers would sit on a raised platform and read a wide variety of materials to cigar workers as they busied at their workbenches. It is interesting to note that they were called readers, not lecturers. The cigar makers would vote on which novel should be read. They also had a voice on the reading of some literature, but for the most part, the reader picked what he was going to read, such as political publications, local, national, international news. They provided education for the reader and the listener alike. It was in this atmosphere that Victoriano Manteiga became known as an intellectual. As a reader, his job was not just to read materials in monotone. His voice had to be adaptable enough to give feeling to the most touching novel and fervor to the most impassioned political agenda. My grandfather was the star of the paper, was the intellectual. When my father came along, it was his turn to take over. It was a very daunting task. My grandfather was not only intellectual in Tampa, but he was intellectual in Cuba. He often corresponded with leaders of Cuba and of Spain and other places and talked about world politics. When my grandfather would sit in a cafe to talk with other lecturers, people would gather around to listen to the conversation. So you can imagine my father's feeling towards having to take over in those footsteps. But my father was a very remarkable man. My father was very dashing, very debonair. He always wore a white suit. He had a little pencil-thin mustache, wavy hair. After his 3 marriages, he became a confirmed bachelor, and he had a black book that was admired by most Latino men. He would hold court at Tropicana restaurant every day. And the owner of La Tropicana, when he went to build a new restaurant in Ybor City in 1973, decided to honor my father because he was a special man. So in the corner of the restaurant, he put a raised platform about a foot higher than the rest of the restaurant. I got the award. I'm going to keep going. There, they put a special table he bought from Spain, high back chairs, different than everywhere else. And my father would sit at that table, and there was a red phone behind the table on a little table there. And the table was actually fenced off with a wrought iron fence from the rest of the room. And there was a reserve for old Manteiga sign in the middle of that table. And politicians would come and gather as they sought the Latin vote. So they would sit there and sit around. And perhaps there were supporters there, and there might be some money passed to help in a campaign. So you gather your friends up and you get some money put in a bag and give it to the judge or whatever. People found this interesting, and a lot of people thought that my father actually was not running a newspaper, but they thought he was the head of the mafia. So they would come and get his autograph. My grandfather was an intellectual. My father was a debonair character. I hope I can only have a little bit of both of them, and I'll do very well. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.